Pat Mitchell, I so appreciate you joining for this conversation. I know you're just back from the Skull World Forum, and then you're off again. And as you have shared, you have been thinking about these topics for a while. So I'm very honored to talk with you.
Well,
And
thank you.
my pleasure. And I just wanted to set the stage by, sharing a little bit about why I wanted to talk with you and where this comes from. I have been in the social change space for quite a while, and in recent years have really honed in on how do we support the change makers. And of course, this has become extremely vital in the last year and a half in particular. And when I think about and talk to people who are leaders in the field, there's these themes of overwhelm and depletion and despair, even as people are still staying in the fight. But this just layers the challenges. So it's not just political setbacks or financial setbacks. We also have the way it hits us behaviorally. And then there is you. And my image of you is you always show up in some beautiful yellow dress with this very infectious smile and creating magic in community. So you know how to navigate challenges with grace. And I'm very interested in learning from you.
Well, that might have been just the best introduction I've ever gotten. Well, I love the concept of navigate with grace. And I hope that I can do that and learn more about doing that every day because what most people observe about me is that I'm moving so fast all the time. And I say to my family that I'm just outrunning age. I want to make sure that the movement has relevance, however, and purpose. So part of the purpose is trying to navigate all those things you just mentioned with grace and essentially trying to keep hope alive.
Yes.
Because if we don't feel the purposes, that leads to exactly what you just described burnout, depression, I think what's very much on my mind is being one of the, as I'm now called, the OG, the old guard, which was a new term I learned from my grandchildren. But we've been in this fight, or I've been in this fight for decades now. And on the front lines from my 20s, 30s, 40s, I mean, you name every decade. And so I sometimes despair at having to go make those same arguments for reproductive rights, make those same cases for women's leadership. And yet being able to do that with energy, passion, and faith and belief that we are going to make progress on all
Mhm.
those things does keep me going. But I get uh, my strength in doing that from other women. And that's why convening other women, being in community with other women leaders is so essential to my sense of not only my personal sense of grace or well-being or hope or any of those things, but also the encouragement and the testimonial, if you will, to this is how change happens, and so we can't
Mhm.
lose that. What I did notice more and more and more with the women that we were meeting and working with, and since we're primarily connecting frontline leaders now through Project Dandelion, I was seeing so much of this burned out
Mm.
feeling,
Yeah.
even though we were all together collectively looking at something, is we would still have those moments of, can we really do this? How do we get the energy to keep going? So I thought we need something deeper. We need
Mhm.
we need work that, to your point, is not just about saving the world, but savoring the world. And if we don't get closely in touch with that from time to time, then it's really hard to keep up the fight. It's really hard to keep up the spirits and do it again and again and again. That
Exactly.
that, that was the motivation for starting to look for opportunities where we could select some of the frontline leaders and
Mhm.
bring them together for what could be a really deep sharing of
Mhm.
those feelings,
Mhm.
and then try and unpack them in ways with help from experienced counselors and therapists and people who know who know how to do that, outside help
Yeah.
to regenerate. And I really do think it's almost like a regeneration of our spirit and our fight and our determination by giving us and reminding us of the experiences that bring us pleasure, that give us reasons to feel happy and joy, and which, again leads to greater kindness and compassion too in the world. So
You're writing my book.
well, it is something I have thought more about recently. I've always, just to back up a little bit and give some context, I've always enjoyed the company of women. In fact, I think I could say without question, I am almost happiest in the company of women when I feel like sisterhood, for what
Yeah.
that big concept of sisterhood. I grew up with that in the 70s. I mean, Robin Morgan wrote Global Sisterhood out of our experiences on
Right.
the front lines of the women's movement. So for me, it was a very natural place to go back to get that feeling of friendship, that deep
Mm.
bonding that women can feel with each other. Men can feel it, I'm sure, though you don't see it as evidently, but I know women are capable of it. And
Yeah.
yet, we have all grown up with this sense of scarcity. And
Mm.
it is that scarcity that I think still drives our competitiveness, our
Mm.
fragmentation, and
Mm.
both of those things lead to depression and burnout.
Mhm.
We
Mhm.
can't compete with each other 24 hours a day for whatever little funding there may be or whatever little power place there may be, but because it's been scarce for
Yeah.
women for such a long time and still is, that seems to me to kind of underlie all the reasons why we are not still the collective power that we could be if we were working together. So ultimately, I'm after that, Lisa. I'm after getting rid of that,
Yeah.
getting rid of that feeling of scarcity, feeling of if she succeeds, I get less. That whole zero sum game,
Mm.
which is just so destructive and so much a part of the burnout. I mean, you
Mhm.
just can't spend that much time competing for whatever little things there are offered from time to time. So I'm really been very much focused on trying to approach the world from a more abundant mindset. That's the thing that's kept me going was this abundant feeling I feel when I'm with sisters, when I'm
Right.
with other women doing the work. And so finding ways to recapture that, I'm calling it abundance. You call it savoring.
Mhm.
Whatever you call it, it is a good, positive feeling
Yeah.
that the world is worth saving.
And it's fascinating, isn't it? Because as I'm listening to you, I'm like, these are things that are so hard to put into words. You're doing it. But I can't think of anybody, honestly, who has done more to cultivate a sense of community and that abundance among women between co-founding TEDWomen and Connected Women Leaders and Project Dandelion. This has been a gift to the world that you've been giving for decades. And one of the pieces that really interests me in it is from your media life as first woman president of PBS and first woman producer and senior producer at CNN, and this understanding of the power of story as a tool, if you will, of to
Mhm.
connect people in community. I don't hear a lot of people talk about that. So I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit and how in particular you see that as alive right now.
Well, storytelling is our biggest tool for change. And that's not just changing the world, that's changing ourselves.
Mhm.
And when we bring women together, it's one of the first things we do is share our personal stories. So that gives us a common ground. That gives us a place to start, no matter how distant our lives and our life journeys have been or our backgrounds. So getting to a place where we can do that, where we can share deeply, honestly, authentically our stories, and then the stories of how we do our work, how we move through the world, how we get through burnout. It's that ultimate opportunity in a safe environment where you could put aside scarcity and competitiveness and just allow yourself to speak and feel about the work and about being what it is we all want to accomplish. So that's the beginning point in every convening we do. And then once that stories are told, once the personal stories are told, then the other stories start to come of experiences that have defined their work or that have helped them get over a bad time or helped them achieve a goal. Then we start the learning. And then out of that, absolutely every time comes this deep, deep connection. And that connection is what sustains us after we leave these circles.
Mhm.
Because when you're having a bad day or the law you were working for didn't get passed or the policy didn't get funded or well, I know my sister in Nairobi had that same experience. I'm going to call her and talk to her. Or
Mm.
it's a remembering too that is a part of the experience. I want to speak to how hard it is to describe it because
Okay.
when I come back, as I just returned from this retreat in Ibiza, and my family are all saying, "So tell me, what happens? What
Mm.
do you do?" And, well, we sit in a circle and we share stories, and, I mean, it sounds so frivolous, and for many of us, we didn't allow ourselves enough of that for that very reason. Rest was anathema to the
Mm.
work that needed to get done. Rest was not possible. There was too much to do. And I was as guilty of that as one all the other women that I heard say the same thing.
Aren't you
Retreat?
still?
No, 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 we can't
Right.
go on retreat. I mean, I remember Mary, and I think she won't mind my quoting her here. When I first told Mary Robinson that I was gonna do this retreat in Mexico, and I wanted her to come, and she looked at me, she said, "I do not do retreats." And I thought, "Well, of course not." I mean, she's been president of a country. She's been she's now an elder. She was a high commissioner. She's done everything. Of course, she didn't think there was time for a retreat or a need for a retreat. But I'm trying now to bring Mary into these retreat is the wrong word. It's
Mm.
really a time of restoration
Mhm.
because you're not retreating. This is why the word's wrong. We are
Right.
not retreating from the world. We are restoring ourselves to return to the world better
Right.
prepared, better rested, more optimistic and
Mhm.
hopeful
Mhm.
because we have had this experience of community. And you're absolutely right that it is that feeling of community that is created through stories.
Mhm.
There's almost no other way to do it. You can't bring people together for 5 days and expect them to leave as sisters if they don't have a beginning point. And that beginning point are the stories that we tell ourselves, that we tell each other, that we're living with, that we're trying to fight, that we're trying to change. It's all about the stories of our
Yeah.
lives.
And to that point, this is something I'd love your thoughts on because I've been trying to look at what are the stories that we live within, not just our own stories, but what are the ones that we inherit culturally, right? And that's where I started examining this idea of save the world, which we may not say a lot now, but most of us have kind of grown up with that, right? You know, from 56 years ago, the first Earth Day, that was the theme. And we've heard
Mhm.
of a lot of manifestations of it since. And doing mission driven work, there is that sense of responsibility that the world is on our shoulders. And as I've looked at it, I feel like it is a almost inherently depleting story to tell for two reasons. One is, how can we possibly think we're equal to saving the world? And the other is, it defines the world as in decline. And
Mhm.
certainly we're in a time of decline in many ways, but there's some interesting work on something called declinism. it shows that when people believe that things are going downhill, there tend to be one of two reactions. One is they disengage, and
Mhm.
the other is they get nostalgic and attached to political parties that talk about the good old days. So
Yeah.
curious about your thoughts about that.
Well, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, I have always had this need to do whatever, save the world kind of thing, and you have too, clearly. And yet I can start to just feel really overwhelming when you're living in times like this one. And I've seen it with my granddaughters in particular, who went through periods of, I'm never getting married, I'm never having children, I wouldn't bring a child into this world. But I've seen them change after going through some periods of reflection and what I would think of as restoration and savoring the world. I mean, in each of their cases, they've come to a different place about life by their experiences in nature, their
Mhm.
experiences of being on the ocean. They have put themselves with encouragement into situations where they are remembering why it matters to keep fighting for it and
Yeah.
not to get overwhelmed by the fact it can't happen. The doomism, the declinism is so real, and especially with the younger
Mhm.
generation. I think us OGs, we remember when things got better for a
That's right.
time for women in particular, and now we're seeing it go back the other way. But that generation needed to reclaim hope desperately, and I'm seeing it slowly happening among, I'm just using my grandchildren as
Mhm.
examples, but I also saw it happening in these current, convenings I've done where there's been a wide age difference,
Mhm.
and I've seen this younger generation, first of all, embracing nature,
Mm.
wanting more time with the walks in the among the trees, understanding more the connection between mental and emotional good health and the pleasures of this bountiful earth that we live on. So we got to have that.
Yeah.
And since they're reclaiming that or are grabbing whatever, or maybe seeing it for the first time, I don't know, but I think it's restoring their spirits to believe that they can and that they must make a difference.
That really touches me deeply. I first got involved in climate work because I had two young children, right? And recently, my oldest son, who's 26, said something to him about political state of things, and he said, "I haven't really known anything differently." And that really speaks to what you just said about how those of us of a certain generation, we experience progress.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's so much a part of this, Lisa. We were in darker times. We have
Mhm,
lived through them, and we did claim reproductive rights. We did
mhm.
get the right to vote 100 years ago, even though they're trying to take that away too now. But you can have two reactions to that. You can either say, "Oh God," as I said at the beginning, like, "Oh no, not again." And yet believing that we're prepared to be there with the right spirit and optimism. We did this before, we can do this again. I think that's where us OGs are coming in handy now, because now I can actually stand up in a group as I did recently and say, Let me remind you, the fights have been big
Mhm,
before and seemingly unwinnable
mhm.
and many times, but there were wins, there were victories, there was progress. But I also believe we have to do a lot of inner work. Who was it who said, you can't love the world if you don't first love yourself? You
Mhm.
can't be a warrior
Right.
for the beauties if you haven't taken them in and felt them and experienced them. So for me, that's been missing
Abs
in our activism. It's been missing.
Absolutely. That's what I feel so passionate about the need for and actually about the opportunity for.
Let me share a quick story. And you may have read my newsletter on the
I
Sierra
did.
Nevada retreat with the indigenous
I
women.
did. Yes, I did.
There was one moment where one of the 2, well, more than 1, 3 or 4 of us kept pushing these
Mm,
women to be more specific about what they meant when they said they take care of the ocean,
mm,
or they have been protecting the ecosystem, the natural ecosystem for generations. And we kept saying, yeah,
mm,
we get that, but what? What did you do? And they said, stand up, come with us. And we went outside and we were on the beach, which made this particularly poignant and also workable or understandable. And they said, just stand here.
mm,
And any of the negative thoughts you have about what is wrong with
mm.
this ocean, give them back to the ocean. Just silently give them back. And I could see we were all kind of going, okay, this is a strategy, you know. this this is a conservation. But they just insisted that we just stand there and keep thinking that we were giving back, letting the ocean take back the things that we know needed to be done. And it was interesting how we all came back into the room and later we're going, you know, I think I could see another way for that work. It actually led us to review the way we were approaching it, essentially from a different place, and as hokey as it sounds, a different place of love and
Yeah.
and compassion for the water we're trying to save. I know that sounds really woo-woo.
No, no,
I
it's the second time in this conversation that it struck me that the most important and transformative things are very hard to put into words, you know,
Very, very
right?
hard.
But
Very
I
hard
think
to describe.
what you're pointing to sounds to me like the word that I used with respect to you in the very beginning. There's an element of grace, and I don't mean that in a religious way necessarily, because I think that can be very limiting, but just through an engagement in the world where we recognize that it's all a lot bigger than us.
I really do think anything we do to bring
Mm,
an element of grace, which for me sort of translates more into compassion and kindness. If we did more of that with
mm,
each other
mm,
and in our work, I think things would be much better. We have to trust in ourselves, first of all, to know that we're doing the best we can. We're doing what we need to do, but trust that we might not have everything we need and
mm,
we might need some things from others. And then trust that when we are with others in the struggle, that
mm.
we can trust each other to be working toward the same goals. So that's the community element. You can't build community without that really deep sense of trust.
I know we're already over time, but we've touched on Savor the World, but I really just want to dive into that a little bit more. It it came to me as this alternative to the Save the World story. And I think it's important to say what savoring is. I think of it as not letting good things pass unnoticed or
Yeah.
unappreciated, right? But giving it a little time. And the research on it will show that it does, in fact, replenish people and its well being and it's separate from the work. And where I'm looking at it now is that it's not just about personal well being, but it is about this practice of cultivating a love of the world that
Mhm.
is great enough that it helps us do the work of safeguarding.
Absolutely. And yes, you can say, well, I start my day with a walk among the trees. And we know now medically that it lowers your
Mhm.
blood pressure, that it does all kinds of medically good, healthy things for us. I mean, we know that savoring the world, especially the beautiful parts of it, the natural resources that we're so blessed with having, we know that savoring that is good for saving ourselves.
Right?
Both in terms of health, but also in terms of preparation. I would like to recommend that you try and see a new film that's been made by His Holiness the Dalai Lama.
You
Mm.
spoke with Richard Gere about that.
Yeah.
Yes.
He doesn't use the word savoring, but he does say that we can't address what needs to be addressed without much more compassion and kindness. And
Mm,
because that is going to give us joy, and
mhm.
joy is essential to not being burned out. If you're feeling joy about what you're doing, you're not going to get burned out. You're not going to get down and depressed. You're not going to feel overwhelmed. You're going to feel joyful. And that sounds like, okay, how am I going to? But you can find joy every day in something in this beautiful world. But taking the time to think about what that is, and then more importantly, taking the time away, what feels like away from the work to do that instead of seeing it as time to put into the work, which is a whole
Mhm.
mindset shift for all of us. We take time to admire the beautiful trees and the flowers and the rivers and all the things that are part of what we're trying to save. If you take time to savor them, you're going to feel stronger and better and more resilient and better prepared to actually do the work of saving it.
And one of the amazing things is that that is in our self agency, right? Whereas something
Yes.
like when you talk about awe, it seems to me, amazing experience, right? But it is a little more contingent on something truly remarkable happening.
We've gotten very disconnected from words like awe and savor and
Yeah.
appreciate and grace. I mean, so
Mm.
if you can recover the meaning of words like that, and I know you will in the book, I think it's it's a very timely need.
I know you're focused on bringing frontline leaders together right now, but for those who are not in that category or they can't join, is there some simple, accessible practice? People have their own little ways, and I always love to ask, is there something you can access on a daily basis that you might offer to others?
Lisa, I wish I had that for you.
No worries.
Better yet, I wish I had that for myself.
Okay. Yeah.
No,
So
but I'm beginning. Here I am at 83, and I am just beginning to think, what is my practice?
mm,
Because I've just been too busy doing to actually think about what I'm doing enough. So
mhm.
I'm trying to learn to meditate. Pretty much a failure so far. I can't get that mind down, but I am trying because I think it's good for me. I love to dance.
Mhm.
So if I can put music on and move, that will get me from a burned out moment to a joyful moment pretty quickly. So that's something that that's a practice I can pull. I'm taking singing lessons. I'm just thinking, I'm trying to do the things as you suggest that are about savoring life and the world a bit more. And it is when I tap into those practices, I do feel more resilient for the work. There's no
Mhm.
question. I do.